Welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today, I'm joined by John Hryhorchuk. He is the Senior Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at Texas 2036, a nonpartisan, data-driven public policy think tank here in Austin, Texas. John previously worked as the Deputy Director of Budget and Policy for Governor Greg Abbott, and he joins us here today. John, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me, Brad.
I appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited to talk to you. I've been sort of aware of your organization, I think maybe through social media. I've seen things that you'll post, and I've always kind of, in the back of my mind, thought I should sort of look into sort of what they're doing and, you know, what they're all about. Texas 2036, I guess that's the bicentennial, correct?
Yes, sir.
As a Texan, a multi-generation Texan, I should know that off the top of my head. So I'm excited to talk to you and learn more about what you guys do and you yourself. So I gave a very brief intro there. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think understanding what Texas 2036 does, we use data to identify, the most pressing challenges that face our state, as well as the most promising solutions to address those challenges, with the goal of continuing our state's prosperity to our bicentennial in 2036 and beyond.
Okay. Well, and beyond, I think, is important. Hopefully, it's not just bicentennial. I guess the next would be tricentennial, right?
I think a lot about, this concept of the Texas miracle and people thinking about it in terms of like as though it's this fleeting thing. And I think we need to have Texans have a much bolder concept of, it's not just a miracle. We've earned this and we can continue putting the policies in place to drive our prosperity throughout the century.
Do you think that that's a common problem in politics, that people are just sort of thinking about, I don't know, the problem du jour, let's say, or the issue du jour? Just they're thinking about it right now and like, what's a quick fix to just sort of put a Band-Aid on it? Do you think that people aren't thinking about the long-term implications of stuff?
It's important that we do both.
Yeah.
The immediate problems of the day are worth addressing and deserve attention, but it shouldn't come at the expense of planning for the state that we want for our kids and grandkids. And sometimes that means putting in place policies that really won't show their full benefit for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. When we talk about major investments in water infrastructure, for example, doing those kinds of things, we're talking on generational horizons. But if we don't take those actions today, we're in a difficult position 20 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I mean, as a parent myself, I fall into that idea that thinking about the next generation is pretty important for sure. So you guys have been around, if I'm not mistaken, the first legislative session that y'all were really active in was the 2021. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so, you've had a couple of legislative sessions under your belt. Are there any major past successes that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, we've been involved in a lot of bills that have become law, helping with the research or data work behind informing some big solutions, frankly. We've been involved in the past to more than 100 bills that we've supported that have become law. There are things out there that are as big as completely overhauling how our permanent school fund is structured, which is leading to record investment returns right now. Being involved in the state's pension reform efforts in 2021, which is saving tens of billions of dollars for Texas taxpayers. We've been involved in helping to improve public education and affording healthcare price transparency. We've been involved in reducing the state's uninsured rate. And then many of the major infrastructure investments that you saw last session with regards to water or state parks or broadband. We're kind of in that zone when you think about the areas that we work. It's that nonpartisan meat and potatoes type government that just makes the quality of life better for all 30 million Texans.
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking at y'all's website and everything that y'all do, you'll have a strategic framework that I guess it sort of gives I guess there's 6 major areas. It ranges from everything from education to healthcare to what else is there?
Infrastructure,
Yep.
yeah, natural resources. We got justice and safety, and what we call government performance. Basically, is government organized for success? Is it fiscally solvent? Does it have a quality workforce? Does it have the data systems it needs to deliver efficient production for the citizens.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that there's some agencies in Texas that have very outdated what is it? I guess data methods, how they enter data, how they the technology they use is very outdated and it could use some updating. So that would probably be good, I would assume. Um, so let's talk about some of these, but I guess more generally, on y'all's website, you say that, you're ensuring Texas is the best place to live and work, and that's sort of the goal. And I mean, I know it's more broad than that, but I think that's probably a pretty narrow, succinct way to put it. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So, I mean, a lot of people already say that. I mean, it is Texas after all, and I think that a lot of people might consider themselves Texans before they consider themselves Americans, and that's just the way Texas is. So, a lot of people already think that it's a great place to live and work. What are the top priorities in y'all's framework to make it even better?
Well, as you mentioned, there are 36 goals across there that range into all different aspects of people's life. But when you narrow it down to what are the competitive advantages that are really going to drive our state in the future, we need to have a qualified workforce for the jobs of the future, but also making sure that Texans, native Texans, have the skills and credentials necessary to fill those jobs. One of the big things we've seen is over recent decades, there's been economic prosperity has often been driven by um, domestic net migration, individuals who have moved to Texas with higher degrees of education and skills than our native Texas workforce. And given all of our resources and the quality of our schools, we'd really like to see Texans emerging from our public education and university systems prepared to compete and thrive in the Texas economy. Um, Also, when we look at the big things that drive our state's long-term importance, it's those infrastructure things. Do we have the energy? Do we have the water necessary to uh, meet the economic needs of our state over the long term? And are we able to mix that all together in a world where it is still an affordable place to grow a business and raise a family? So things like housing and healthcare really come into play in terms of that childcare. These things that hit every family at some point in life in terms of costs. So when you have those things kind of taken care of with a stable tax environment that isn't overburdening our citizens but still delivering quality services, that's kind of the secret mix.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about. I mean, and I want to talk to you about water and energy and that infrastructure stuff. But I think what's been t on top of y'all's mind recently has been healthcare, and the affordability outcomes. Looking at your strategic framework here, patient affordability, system affordability, health outcomes are all sort of down. It's not a huge trend line just yet, but so far that's what y'all have, and that certainly is concerning. Um, what can the government do? Is it the government's, are there things the government can do, or alternatively, are there things that the government should stop doing?
One of the things we think about in terms of healthcare costs generally is that a lot of solutions that involve government are a balloon squeeze. It's shifting costs from one entity to another, and that's a common solution. We think that you need to rather empower the markets to be what we call healthy markets that are transparent. But then there's been a lot of incredible work on healthcare price transparency in recent years. But we also need to empower consumers of healthcare to be able to act, to engage on that data so that they can make informed choices, so they get the care they need at a price they can afford. One of the things that really scares us in the data is the number of Texans, including those with health insurance, that skip care due to cost. And that is one of the leading metrics that we track because it's just so concerning. Of course, we as a state have a high uninsured rate. We have the highest uninsured rate of any state in the country, and there are solutions available to help solve some of that. But when even Texans with insurance are skipping care because they can't afford it, that is the alarm bells are going off.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. It's not cheap sometimes, even with insurance. Why is Texas? I mean, I guess I've seen different reasons, but what is the either in your opinion or I guess the how y'all see it? Why are so many Texans uninsured?
We did a multi-year extensive study on this. We called it the Who Are the Uninsured study. It's on our website. I highly recommend people check it out, where we interviewed over 2,000 uninsured Texans and had 70 focus groups in every corner of the state, English, Spanish, et cetera, to try to get at that question of like, what is so unique about Texas that causes us to have such a large uninsured population? One of the things that emerged from the data was an issue of the conversation often gets pigeonholed with Medicaid expansion. And our data shows Medicaid expansion would immediately solve for about 15% of the state's uninsured population. But even if we were to expand Medicaid, we would go from 50th to 50th. We would not catch up to Oklahoma or Georgia. So we need to have solutions beyond just Medicaid expansion as part of the conversations that are a lot more ripe in terms of the political discourse in Texas. And that's where we've been focusing a lot of our attention for this upcoming session is what are those things we can do? Because frankly, the legislature has done some really good things. Our trend lines for the uninsured are going in the right direction. They're just still behind all the other states. But a little known bill from 2021, a beautiful bipartisan bill that was Senator Nathan Johnson out of Dallas and Representative Tom Oliverson out of Houston came together and unanimously passed a bill that make the Affordable Care Act cheaper in Texas. And as a result, over 300,000 Texans now have health insurance that didn't before. These are stories that don't necessarily get the headlines, but there's some really great work happening in the Texas legislature on this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, is there any information about sort of the general, I don't know, the general person that's uninsured? Is it like recent immigrants? Is it the, low socioeconomic status? Is it, people that just moved here? Like it seems, it does seem baffling, I guess, because it is America and I know there's insurance out there. I also know it's expensive. And I'm just kind of curious, okay, if the Medicaid expansion happened, all right, that would solve for 15%. Who are the rest of the 85%?
Yeah, so if you about 15% is roughly undocumented or immigrants that otherwise aren't eligible for government programs.
Sure.
The balance of that is 70% are either U.S. citizens and or immigrants who are eligible for programs. A sliver of that is children who are eligible for CHIP programs, the Children's Medicaid, but are not availing themselves. And the vast majority are individuals who would be eligible for the Affordable Care Act, often subsidized Affordable Care Act policies, and are not signing up for them. And that's the area that we see as the most ripe for policy engagement in Texas right now. Specifically, we see that there are millions of Texans who are eligible for free plans through the Affordable Care Act, but are not signing up for them. And this is fascinating because, again, to the question you asked, like, who is an uninsured Texan? There's this idea that it is a very low-income individual that is driving this issue. But most Texans who are uninsured are working. They are in jobs that do not provide them with health insurance. And so there is this perception, this came out routinely in our survey data, this perception that if your employer does not give you health insurance, you don't have any other options. So you will just be uninsured. And there's this perception that the ACA marketplace is exorbitantly expensive. And that may have been true 4 or 5 years ago. But because of changes that have been made, led by the Texas legislature as well as Congress, the Affordable Care Act has gotten much, much cheaper for Texans and is something that deserves a second look when open enrollment fires up this fall.
Yeah, I was actually going to guess that it's the association with insurance and a job is so tightly knit in Texas and certainly in the United States. And I was thinking as you were talking, I'm glad that you brought that up. I mean, I've always had insurance through work, and I think that's going to change sometime soon, which is totally fine. It's a good things are happening, but I've thought about it. I've never done it on my own before, so I actually don't know how it works. I know I'll be able to figure it out, but there's that is sort of an interesting aspect to it that people just those two things, work and insurance, are so closely knit. People don't realize, oh, you can actually just do this yourself. You mentioned healthcare price transparency, which is something that I'd like for you to go in a little bit more detail about sort of what that is, because I think people, I mean, unless, it seems like such a common thing. I mean, I go to the store, I know how much milk costs because it has a price tag on it. But if I go to the hospital, I don't know how much that's going to cost until I get the bill I don't know, sometime down the road. And sometimes it's pretty surprising. So what is the healthcare price transparency and y'all like how do we improve that?
Yeah, there has been a lot of progress made on this front in recent years, especially on the hospital and insurance side of the equation, so that you should be able to, if you have insurance, pull up your phone, go through an app, and figure out how much visiting a certain doctor, getting a certain procedure will cost you in advance. That is not perfect. One of the things that we have seen in terms of compliance is that over the last 4 years, we have on our website a dashboard where you can look at hospital price transparency compliance trends, as well as some of the prices and get breakdowns of, within the Austin area, this is the price charged at this hospital versus that hospital based off the insurance. You can get some pretty fun insights in there for routinely shoppable experiences. But the trend line has gone up significantly in terms of compliance. But there are whether or not it is yet gotten to a point where employers can start making intelligent plan designs using this information. That's kind of like the next step. I mean, there are other things we can do in terms of improving the actionability of price estimates that they give you when you show up at the hospital for something that maybe wasn't as thoroughly planned.
Yeah.
But really, there's going to be this moment that comes forward where employers have the opportunity to control some of their costs by making more intelligent plan designs that can help you find care that is of the same quality at a lower price, and setting up systems so that it's hard to shop for everything, frankly. Like we're constantly going to HEB and having to price compare. But it is the more we can make finding value as frictionless as possible, the better it'll be for the overall system.
Yeah. So sticking on healthcare, you'll also have written recently about mental health care, or the mental health. I don't know. It certainly seems like there's a crisis, at least to some degree. And it's in children, it's in adults, it's in the justice system, it's certainly in the homeless, which is always a big issue, especially here in Austin. What is are there ideas that Texas 2036 supports for mental health care or solving for that? I don't know if it's solvable, but let's hope so. Is it just insurance? Is it awareness? Is it something else?
Yeah, our lens on this has been trying to increase the number of Texans who have insurance so that they can get the care they need when they need it. One of the things that came out in our Who Are the Uninsured study was this vicious cycle of Texans who had mental illness were less likely to take the steps necessary to sign up for insurance, which would then cause situations to get worse and lead to a negative feedback loop in that regard. So finding ways to make eligibility determinations faster, easier, increasing broad awareness of the affordability of Affordable Care Act plans, anything we can do to help increase access to reduce the likelihood that cost is stopping somebody from getting the care that they need as early as possible, we think would be a good step to take there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's interesting. I guess that sort of vicious cycle of people, if they have the mental health issue, not signing up, and then it just sort of gets worse and worse, and that sort of makes sense, I guess, with the perception of what mental health is. But mental health, obviously, a crisis can be in many different forms. Is there an aspect to the children's part of the mental health that you guys are focusing on, or that you all have anything interesting that you all found there?
I mean, there's certainly a lot of concerns that have surfaced in recent years about children's mental health. And it's not just mental health specifically, but the impact of the pandemic on education and learning and classroom behavior and discipline and all those things. It all feeds into this generalized need to focus on and invest in our children to get them back to where they need to be in our schools and outside of them as well. But it is our state has made some really good investments in that regard. I think there's going to be a significant discourse this upcoming session about the role of cell phones and social media in our classrooms and how that impacts. So, I think there's a robust public discussion going on as we kind of try to course correct some of the issues that have been trending negative in recent years.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if any of y'all's research is if you've come across any research, if y'all have done any research on it, because the talk about cell phones and social media in schools has been building up, and I know some representatives have been talking about introducing bills to ban them in schools, and a lot of pushback from parents and everything like that. A lot of recent work and books have come out recently saying, hey, there's a really close correlation of the rise of cell phones and the rise of mental health and depression and stuff like that in children. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that that'll be certainly very interesting in the upcoming session. Do y'all have data on that?
We don't have proprietary data on that. We're consumers of the same stuff that you've been reading in that regard. But it's an area that is certainly worthy of attention.
Yeah. So since we're talking about kids and education, I guess education is, are we going to get vouchers? Or are we not going to get vouchers? Are the falling test scores because of COVID or because of something else? I don't know. That's all sort of, maybe a separate conversation. But as far as, looking at y'all's strategic framework, it does look like early literacy is worsening. And, I don't know how good it was before. Was it good? Is it, going from bad to worse is not good. Going from, was it really great and now it's just a little bit worse? What is y'all's take on that early literacy? Because I think that's something that a lot of parents and Texans probably, when you're talking about education, that's like step number one, literacy.
Literacy is one of the areas where I think data-informed decision making is starting to really make an impact. So in 2019, House Bill 3 was passed that really put in a focus on the science of teaching reading and kind of getting rid of some of those processes that were done before that frankly weren't working for half of our kids. There was also an effort made to have a lot more teacher training on those early literacy skills that are so foundational. We see that is starting to take foot. The pandemic certainly slowed things down. You would have expected an immediate upswing after House Bill 3, but then 2020 came. And so the efforts have been going a little bit slower, but generally speaking, I think it's at least on the right trajectory. And the legislature continues to do some really smart things to improve the quality of literacy instruction. One of the things that happened last session was the passage of House Bill 1605 by Brad Buckley. That is this fantastic bill that will improve the quality and alignment of our curriculum to our standards, with the idea that you can teach literacy in a much smarter way in early grades so that it's structured to build upon itself. And you can actually get better like stories built in there, things like that will be relevant to learning history, relevant to learning sciences, relevant to broader social understanding. That is, I think, the soonest that will hit a classroom is next fall. So you're not going to see the impact of that quite yet, but it's representative of, generally speaking, some pretty smart and data-driven investments made by our legislature.
Yeah. So, I mean, this next issue is a particular importance to me because I live in Austin, and Austin is so much there. It's such a beautiful area, the green belt, the lakes, all sorts of stuff. Is it the most beautiful place in Texas? Maybe that's debatable. I don't know. But we have a lot of green space. And, I keep hearing from the local officials about water, water, water. And, I understand some of that. But the sustainability of our water sources all over Texas, I think, is a news story that comes up from time to time, certainly in droughts. And I mean, I've lived in Texas my whole life, and there's always been talk about this. But the sustainable water trend, I mean, it might be of all the trends that y'all are tracking, it looks like it might be the worst. Maybe.
There's,
I don't, there's no number on it. It just kind of looks
yeah,
like.
no, it's an area that every Texan should be thinking about, and every legislature should be preparing to invest in, because we are blessed as a state to have rampant, big economic growth, lots of folks moving here, our population is growing. At the same time, we have state projections in terms of water needs that are significant, and we are going to be releasing a study later this fall that gets into how much money will the state need to spend to meet its long-term water need? When I'm talking long-term, over the next 30 to 50 years.
Yeah.
And these numbers are significant. We need to have a state plan to, under 2024 costs. Who knows what that'll cost in 2070, but in 2024 costs, it's about $150 billion in investment that's necessary on supply, on wastewater infrastructure, on fixing the aging, depreciating pipes, all that kind of stuff as a statewide effort. And so last session, the legislature did a great thing. And, when you went and voted in the constitutional amendments last time, had the opportunity to vote on Prop 6, which gave $1 billion and created the Texas Water Fund. And that water fund is divided up into both creating new supply as well as fixing some of the existing failing infrastructure. But that's $1 billion towards what we see as a $150 billion challenge. Now, again, we have state financing mechanisms. It's not like we need to go out and write a $150 billion check today.
Sure.
But the gap in terms of what is currently kind of in the hopper and how big we need to go is it's more than $100 billion away from where we need to be right now.
I mean, that's a huge number. I mean, the Texas Miracle, I've lived through it. I feel like I'm still living through it. But if the Texas Miracle were ever to slow down or economic growth were to slow down, I am curious if we would be able to afford $150 billion by 2040 or whatever the number is going to be after inflation and everything. That's a really high number.
Yeah, one of the things when we look at the precedent of what the state has been able to do, like this is Texas. We can do really big things.
Sure.
Like everything's bigger in Texas. Our solutions are bigger in Texas. And having the mindset, like this growth and abundance mindset about how we can solve our future problems, I think is very important because we can look at past things that we have done really good jobs at. In 2013 and 15, the legislature came together on highway funding. We had a lot of challenges going on back then, and they passed back-to-back constitutional amendments to dedicate severance and sales tax to funding our highway systems. And as a result of that, we've gotten about 28 billion, I believe is the number, in appropriations from those dedications over the last decade to highways.
Yeah.
That has been leveraged with other financing mechanisms from the state and federal government that allows us to have a state transportation plan that is like, we will spend $100 billion by over the next decade type press releases attached to it.
Yeah.
We can do the same thing on water. The trick is you just have to start and again, plan on making these steady but incremental investments over time, because when you do have 50 years to get there, it's a lot easier than trying to write a check all at once.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I hope that planning goes well. I would like for Town Lake to stay full of water. That'd be nice. I mean, I wonder, because of the population growth in Texas, how much of this is because of the population growth. It kind of makes me feel like, and I don't know if y'all have come across this thought in y'all's research, but if there's a theoretical maximum population that our Texas water systems can sustain, and I don't know, I'm sure desalination can come into play and stuff like that. So maybe it's moot. I don't know, but I always kind of think about that. Is there a maximum?
We have 254 counties, and every single one of them has room for growth.
Yeah.
I think that there is certainly a conversation about what is driving more use in terms of other, sectors or whatever. But I don't want us to. My personal belief on this is that we should be coming from the perspective of how can we solve our problems without having to sacrifice certain industries or stunting the growth of certain communities. Because let's be honest, Texas is awesome. Texas is the greatest place in America, and America is the greatest place in the world. We can't blame people from other states wanting to come here. And we should welcome them, frankly.
Yeah.
And we should have the resources to have that abundance, go forward for the rest of the century.
Yeah, I guess my question would be better asked, if the current system stayed the same, is there a threshold? Of course, new systems can come into place and new resources, desalination, whatever the case is, and that can change. But I've always wondered that. But you're right, Texas is the best place in America, and America is the best place in the world. So I guess if you put two and two together, Texas is the best place in the world.
There you go.
So I want to wrap up on this question. You guys are always talking about, you are researching sort of how to, like I said, move Texas into the bicentennial and beyond, right? For our kids, grandkids, and great grandkids, and so forth. And there's a lot of stuff that y'all are focusing on. But I'm wondering if there is any sort of major blind spots that people, and when I say people, it could be, you and me sitting here right now, it could be the governor or the legislature or whoever, that Texans overall just aren't focusing on, but maybe should be.
Yeah, I'll hit two things real quick. One, just kind of on that there's this nexus between water and energy.
Okay, yeah.
Obviously, I think Texans have a lot of awareness of the challenges in our grid, and our legislature has obviously been making some big investments in thermal generation. I'll say that investments in generation need to be thought of alongside a statewide water strategy because of the connection between the generation and water need for those power plants. ERCOT has had a study that said about a fifth of our generation could go offline during a severe sustained drought. So thinking about the grid in context of water, a lot of these problems cross over multiple silos of thought. We also, when we're talking about the grid, need to make sure that we have a focus on how do we have the appropriate transmission build out to make that all work. The other shifting dramatically is I think that there's a real opportunity available to our state as it comes to high schools. I think that we've had a lot of focus, rightfully so, on early education. And we had last session a big focus on community college finance, which the legislature passed a massive nation-leading community college finance reform to make our community college system more responsive to local labor market needs and focused on completion. Where we have right now this incredible policy opportunity is thinking about how do we embed into the high school curriculum the opportunity for every Texas high school student, not just to graduate with a diploma, 90% are getting their diploma. We have really high school graduation rate, but having every high school student have access to a career aligned credential of value. So they're immediately workforce ready the day they step out without having to go off for 4-year, university. And again, 4-year universities are great. More education is great. We're not trying to say that people shouldn't get as much education as possible. But, there are some real labor market trends we see in terms of the market value of a high school diploma, and better embedding some workforce skills, workforce credentials into the high school experience could make us have that powerful workforce. Because if you go back to, where we started, what are the things that we need to make sure to keep the Texas miracle going? It's workforce, it's water, it's energy, it's cost of living. These things, we have some really great solutions at our fingertips that can drive the Texas economy for decades to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be a really cool idea. I wish I had graduated high school with something, I don't know, carpentry, electrician, whatever. I could still go to college and major in what I majored in, but I could be doing more things around the house today, or
Yeah.
be, I don't know, an electrician. Who knows?
Yeah,
Uh,
and that is a key thing, though, is making sure that we structure it so it's that you are career ready and still have the ability to go to college. This is concept of a dual readiness,
yeah,
that where workforce training doesn't foreclose those future opportunities, but is a new baseline and expectation in terms of what it means to be a graduate of Texas high school.
yeah. One could maybe even use that credential to pay for their college.
There you
Um,
go.
so, John Hryhorchuk, the Senior Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at Texas 2036, I appreciate you taking the time. Is there any website or social media that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, absolutely. We're at texas2036.org. You can find us on X or Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, Texas 2036. Subscribe to our newsletter. There's great information every week.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate taking the time.
Thank you.